Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River, where we think religious questions are important, but we want to work out our own answers, and where we gather to share ideas and support one another. My sermon title today uses the word polity. Polity. Polity is a religious organization's way of governing itself. And for example, the Episcopal Church is governed by bishops, as is the Methodist Church. In fact, episkopos is Greek for bishop. That's why the Episcopalians are called Episcopalians. They're governed by bishops. We have congregational polity, which means every congregation is independent. No one can tell us what to do. We own our own property, and we hire and fire our own staff, including the minister, if we have a settled minister. So the Baptists, by the way, also have congregational polity, and the Congregationalists, of course, do too. They name themselves after their polity. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys and needs and gifts. We like to speak of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and in celebration of the life we share together. Can we please join in our opening hymn? It's only the first 4 words that are in German, the rest is English. Die Gedanken sind frei, which means the thoughts are free. Number 291. Could we join, please, in our affirmation, which is in the order of service? Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Today, beginning at noon at Government Center, there's a gay pride event that's going to go till 5 o'clock. There will be some of us from the church who will be there at a table arranged by Steve Kamara, and we'll have some literature available if people are interested. I will be there for certainly part of the afternoon, and if you're free, maybe you can come by too. We're experimenting with a sound system that you may have noticed. I say experimenting, the volume may not be right. The speakers which are now here may wind up under the table, or they might be better. We might be able to get rid of one of the two microphones, that is to use this one for everything. This is a better microphone than this one that came with the sound system. So let us know what your experience is, and please be patient while we tinker with this. Are there other announcements?
The Course in Miracles continues every Friday at 11. Our esteemed speaker this morning is one of our panel of experts, along with Dave Lott, who's not here, and Al Video, and Donald runs the control, so I think you go verify this or something like that. We're how many countries are we in now? We believe we just about 40 different countries. So we're doing something like that. The goal of it is not propaganda, meaning this is what you ought to read, but rather here's what you might think about. You might believe, might not. And Dr. Richard is there to give us all kinds of different perspectives on it. It's a seminar, really.
It's a kind of free-for-all, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that thank you, Richard, for being here for your last service of the season. We designed our agenda for next year very shortly. Mooney will be here next week. She is a Unitarian Universalist seminary student, and she has done a great job for us on two occasions. She has been here, so we'll be here again.
It's now Hindu chaplain at Polity.
She is.
I mean, in addition to she just got that.
Any other announcements? I want to tell you 3 UU jokes. Did you hear about the Ku Klux Klan member who became a Unitarian Universalist? Now he burns question marks on people's lawns. What do you get if you cross a Unitarian Universalist with an evangelical? You get someone who rings people's front doorbells for no particular reason. And the third one, the one that's listed in the order of service, a man dies and goes to heaven, and to his great surprise learns that people attend religious services in heaven, just as they had while they were alive. And there's a tour guide that takes him around, and he's shown a stone church with stained glass windows and incense wafting out. And the tour guide said, "Those are the Episcopalians." And you can spin this joke out for a long time. He's shown a Shinto shrine and a Buddhist ashram and a Jewish synagogue and a Presbyterian church. And finally, he's taken deep into the woods where there's a clearing, and a bunch of people are sitting in a circle, drinking coffee and arguing. And the tour guide said, those are the Unitarian Universalists. They're arguing about whether they're here. I have a prayer that I would like to read. It's one that I wrote and that I used here a few years ago, but it seems particularly important to me anyway on this occasion. So could we please be joined in a spirit of prayer or meditation? Let us make this church a refuge from the world, a place where the rules are different. May this be a place, for example, where no experience is necessary, where people are encouraged to risk new things, where a nurse can try her hand at plumbing if she wants to, or a custodian can help manage the finances, or a storekeeper can teach 5-year-olds. May this be a place where people always feel that their efforts have been worthwhile and their energy well spent. And may this be a place where, like in a children's baseball league, everybody gets to play. Let us make this church a refuge from the world, a place where the rules are different. May no one feel invisible here or feel worried about what others might be thinking of them. May no one be bored here. If a person isn't interested in what the minister is talking about today, may he or she be moved by the music or encouraged by a conversation afterward. May this be a place where people are touched, if not by something said, then perhaps by something sung, or by the light coming through the windows, or by the sense that the people who come here support one another. May this be a place where everyone feels safe, safe to follow their thoughts wherever they lead, safe to believe whatever they have to, and safe to share whatever's on their minds or whatever is in their hearts. Let us make this church a refuge from the world, a place where the rules are different, a place where our wells can fill up again, where we can be refreshed and renewed so that when we return to the world with our batteries recharged, we can help transform the world into a place where the rules are different. Amen. And now let us be silent together to create an opportunity for prayer or meditation. Spirit of life, come to me. Sing in my heart all the singers of passion. In the wind, rise in the sea. In my hand, painted like the shape of justice. Pull me, set me free. Spirit of love, come to me, come to me. Unitarian Universalists describe themselves to outsiders by a list of 7 principles that are on a couple pages into the hymnal. They're not numbered 1 through 7, but there's 7 of them, beginning with the inherent worth and dignity of every person and going down to the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. But those are just values that most UUs share. A lot of us were introduced to this quirky approach to religion by one of these little red cards. There was a minister named David Rankin who put together a list of 10 things that he thought at least most UUs would endorse. And I know I personally found this more useful. So I'd like to read you some of the 10 things. We believe in the freedom of religious expression. All individuals should be encouraged to develop their own personal religions and to present openly their religious opinions without fear of censure or reprisal. We believe in the toleration of religious ideas. We believe in the authority of reason and conscience. The ultimate arbiter in religion is not a religious organization or a document or an official, but the personal decision of the individual. We believe in the never-ending search for truth. We believe in the ethical application of religion. Good works are the natural product of a good faith. We believe in the necessity of the democratic process. Records are open to scrutiny. Elections are open to members, and ideas are open to criticism. We believe in the importance of a religious community. The validation of experience requires the confirmation of peers who provide a critical platform along with a network of mutual support. If you never got one of these, by the way, Eric has some at the back and we'll be happy to give you one on the way out. Most of my instincts as a minister tell me I shouldn't give this sermon because as a minister, I feel I need to bring people a positive message, and almost everything I'm going to say is negative. And at the same time, I'm kind of scared too, because I don't want to drive people away from our congregation. But at the same time, as a minister, I feel it's my duty to tell you what I think is the truth. And this is relevant to us. So here goes. I'll try to make future sermons more uplifting. I did figure out a way to get a little uplift at the end, by the way. It's not all downhill. In 1960-61, two liberal Protestant denominations, the Unitarians and the Universalists, combined forces. And their national organizations, their national service organizations, combined into a new Unitarian Universalist Association. That's the service organization of our congregations. It does things like produce the hymnal, provide pamphlets, have a website, that kind of thing. In 1960-61, I was a sophomore at a Catholic high school, having spent 9 years at a Catholic grammar school, and I wasn't happy with Catholicism, at least the version that I was exposed to in a French-Canadian community in the 50s. What I didn't like about it is they kept telling me what to think. I wanted to think for myself. They kept saying, we'll do your thinking for you, just do what we say. And 2 years later, as soon as I got away from my family, because I went off to college, I left Roman Catholicism behind. In that same year, though, the Unitarians and Universalists were combining, and there were articles in the newspaper about it. And I noticed these articles, and I became curious about these religions I had never heard of. And I went to the public library and looked them up in encyclopedias. And I thought, wow, religions where you can think for yourself, where no one tells you what to think. You can think for yourself. And I knew then that if I ever went back to organized religion, it would be to a UU church. And it was a long time before I did. In 1980, I came back to a UU church. I came to this church because I was, even though I lived in Brockton, and now I live in Easton, right next door, I was dating a woman from Fall River, and I was in Fall River practically every weekend. I came to this church. Fast forward 1997, I'm attending my very first General Assembly. That's the national gathering of Unitarian Universalists. That year it was held in Phoenix. And I had become a UU minister in my own right at that time, 1997. I was serving the church in Weymouth. This was my first General Assembly. On the agenda for the General Assembly, the national officials, when I speak of the UU national officials, I mean the officials of the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston. I also mean the officials of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, which is a separate organization. And I also mean the officials of both of our seminaries. We have a seminary in Chicago and one in near San Francisco in the Bay Area. The UU officials were pushing an approach to fighting racism that I wasn't comfortable with because it was different from the Martin Luther King approach, which was the only approach that had ever succeeded. I had learned about racism at age 5 from my mother when she said, there may be Negro children in your class at school. This is when I'm going to the first grade. There may be Negro children in your class, and if there are, other kids may call them the N-word, but don't ever say that. It hurts their feelings. And I said, why would people want to hurt their feelings? And my mother said, well, some people think Negroes aren't as good as other people. And I said, is that true? And she said, of course not. I've known about racism since I was 5, and it had seemed to me in 1997, it had been gradually getting better all my life. With fits and starts, yes, but it had been gradually getting better. But the UU officials were pushing a different approach to fighting racism than the MLK approach. And I was pretty sure I wasn't going to vote for it. The day of the vote, those of us, there were 2,500 UUs in a big hotel ballroom in Phoenix. And the national officials put on a series of speakers for 2.5 hours, a series of speakers, every one of which was saying we should vote for this new program that they were proposing. And the underlying message, this was never stated explicitly, but you couldn't escape it. I mean, you couldn't not get it. The underlying message was, if you don't vote for this particular approach to fighting racism, you are yourself a racist. That message was perfectly clear. We all got it. At the time of the vote, I put up my hand they gave us big yellow cards to hold so people could see us. I put up my arm as high as I could with my yellow card, voting no. And the moderator said, passed unanimously. And a woman I didn't know, but who had apparently seen the moderator do this before, ran to one of the floor mics and screamed at the moderator and said, don't take people's votes away. Some people voted no. So those of us who voted, the moderator claimed she hadn't seen the no votes. So those of us who had voted no were asked to stand. And I was halfway back in this big auditorium, 2,500 UUs. I stood, and not a single person in front of me was standing. And it was a terrifying experience. And my wife, who was sitting next to me, she looked back and she said, yes, there are a few other people further back who are standing also. And then the moderator said, passed overwhelmingly, which of course was true. And then the program went on to other topics. I was on the aisle. A man I didn't know, a white man, came up to me and said, I want you to know that lots of us have doubts about this, but we didn't want to be labeled racist. So that made me feel a little better. Not long afterward, I happened to have lunch with the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It's not that I knew him or we were pals or anything, but he was a guest speaker at the Stoughton Church. And I had attended, and I had been delegated to take him out to lunch. So I took him out to lunch. And he said, you know, being president of the UUA is like trying to herd cats. Being a UU leader is like herding cats, he said. And later I thought about that, and I thought about my experience at the General Assembly. And I thought, yeah, UUs are cats. Our most fundamental value is individual freedom of belief, free speech, free discussion. This is how you get to the truth. You talk it over with other people. We're cats, but he wanted us to be Clydesdales. I say Clydesdale, I'm thinking of those huge, beautiful horses that pull the Budweiser beer wagon. I think there are 8 of them, and they're all pulling together perfectly. Even their steps are synchronized. It's just beautiful. If you're the head of a political action organization or a social justice organization, that's what you want. You want the leaders to decide on a policy, and then you want the members to pull together in the same direction. That's what you want. If you're the head of a social justice organization, you want your people to be Clydesdales. You want to be able to herd them. And I thought to myself, this is what was making me so uncomfortable about the UUA. They thought of themselves no longer as a service organization for our congregations. They thought of themselves as a political action organization. And they were trying to herd us. They were trying to take cats and make them behave like Clydesdales. 2018, so I now just jumped, 21 years in the future, just 4 years ago now. I was on the UU Ministers Facebook page, which is sponsored by the UU Ministers Association and at least unofficially sponsored by the UU Ministers Association and moderated by 2 UU ministers. And I was saying, I was still troubled by this UU approach to fighting racism that still seemed to me to be wrong-headed. It was making racism worse in our congregations, I thought, rather than better. And I was saying to my colleagues now on this Facebook page, I said, doesn't it bother you that the UUA is using the word racism in a different way than what's in the dictionary? I mean, racism in the dictionary, at least until lately, said race-based prejudice. In other words, if you make a prejudgment about someone when you know nothing about them other than their race, that's a racist thing to do. And it doesn't have to be negative. If I assume that a black man likes jazz, that's actually racist because I know nothing about him other than he's black, and I know a lot of black people like jazz, but that doesn't mean this man likes jazz. That's a racist thing to do. It's not a negative thing, but it's a racist thing to do. And of course, if I assume he grew up without a father or in a poor neighborhood or something like that, that's a racist thing to do in kind of a negative way. But the UUA was using a different definition of racism in all of its publications. And I don't want to go into it because that's kind of, it's going to take too much time and it's going off the subject. But according to the UUA's definition of racism, only white people can be racist. Only white people can be racist. And all white people are racist. All white people are racist. You can't help it. Robin DiAngelo, in her book, White Fragility, a bestseller just a couple of years ago, will explain this to you. You're all racist and you can't help it. All you can do is struggle your life long to become more aware of it, but you'll never completely get rid of it. That book is published by Beacon Press. Beacon Press is wholly owned by the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association. I didn't go into all this on my Facebook post, but I said, colleagues, fellow ministers, doesn't it bother you that there are 2 different definitions of racism floating around here? And that's just going to confuse people. And as ministers, we're supposed to communicate. And part of communicating is to be clear. And 3 hours later, excuse me, I said a little bit more. I said, I don't think it's really appropriate to discuss this here on this Facebook page, but isn't there some place where I and some other ministerial colleagues of all colors could talk about this? I just am longing for a way to talk about this. And within 3 hours, the 2 moderators removed me from the group, threw me out of the Facebook group because I had caused harm. I had caused so much harm, especially to ministers of color by bringing this up. I had caused harm. Following year, 2019, a minister named Todd Eckloff, who's the minister of the Spokane, Washington UU congregation, he wrote a book called The Gadfly Papers that had 3 essays in it. And one essay was called The Coddling of the Unitarian Universalist Mind. He was concerned about a kind of cultural thing in the UU movement that he thought was a bad thing, and he wanted us to think about it. And the thing he was concerned about is sometimes called safetyism. Safetyism. Safetyism is the belief that everybody has the absolute right to never be exposed to ideas that make them uncomfortable. This is really prevalent among a lot of college students for the last 20 years or so. Safetyism. We need a safe space. That means a space where I'm never exposed to an idea that makes me uncomfortable. And of course, safetyism is not a good thing. Well, let me back up. When someone disagrees with me, I do feel uncomfortable, and I think that's natural. And as a child, I probably did feel harmed by that, but I've outgrown that. I was taught by others and learned of my own experience that when someone disagrees with you, they're actually doing you a favor. Because nobody is in possession 100% of the truth. And if I'm discussing something with someone else who disagrees with me, almost certainly there's some part of what that other person is maintaining that I can appropriate to enhance my own view. And even in the rare case that I'm 100% right and they're 100% wrong, just having the discussion helps me to understand my own position better through the effort of defending it. Anyway, this Todd Eckloff in his book talked about, he saw a lot of safetyism among especially younger UU ministers, but it was spreading to older ones and to the national officials who were condoning it, as those two moderators, by the way, had condoned the people who felt I had been harmed by my question, that I had harmed them by my question. Well, the General Assembly was in Spokane, Washington that year, the same town where Todd Eckloff was minister, and he went to the General Assembly with a supply of this book he had written and handed them out free. He wanted to stimulate discussion. He thought the Unitarian Universalist movement was being damaged by this safetyism, this attitude that to disagree with someone is to injure them somehow. It seems just absurd even to say that, but it's the way people are behaving. He thought it was bad for the movement, so he was passing out. He wanted to start a discussion, and officials immediately banned him from General Assembly. And a few months later, the UU Ministers Association issued a letter of censure of him for doing this, for all the harm he had caused, and sent this letter of censure to all 1,700 ministers. Normally, letters of censure are just sent to the person, or maybe the person and some local officials of their local ministers group. All 1,700 ministers got this letter censuring Todd Eckloff for this. Then the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is part of the UUA, the Ministerial Fellowship Committee gives something called Ministerial Fellowship, UU Fellowship. It's the UUA stamp of approval. And ministers want to get, it's not the same as ordination. Ministers want to get UUA fellowship because that helps them get jobs, because churches mostly want to hire people who have the UUA seal of approval. It makes perfect sense. We all want UUA fellowship. I have UUA fellowship, though they may throw me out because they threw him out. The Ministerial Fellowship Committee of the UUA removed Todd Eckloff from fellowship. They removed their seal of approval. It's worse than that. Within 24 hours of his passing out the book, someone was circulating online a letter written or signed by 300 white UU ministers, 300 of them, condemning the book as racist and homophobic and causing immeasurable harm especially to people of color, especially to gay and trans people. Well, Todd Eckloff, the guy who wrote the essay, had really been kind of pushed out of his previous job because he was such a strong proponent of same-sex marriage. He had served a UU congregation in Kentucky, and he had been in the local newspapers and so on, very public in advocating for same-sex marriage. And he hadn't been fired by his congregation, but they said to him, "You're making us really uncomfortable. All of our friends are very conservative. Maybe you should go to a more liberal place." And he did. He went to Spokane, Washington, which is a much more liberal place. This man, they were calling racist and homophobic. Nobody who has read his book, and I've read his book more than once, or excuse me, nobody who's accused his book of being racist or homophobic has been able to point to a single passage, a single paragraph, a single sentence that is racist or homophobic. But these ministers, 300 of them, signed this letter within 24 hours. Now, the book had only been distributed, the distribution had only begun 24 hours previously. So almost certainly, the vast majority of these ministers hadn't even read the book. They're condemning a book that they haven't read. It seems so otherworldly that UU ministers could do that, you know? And incidentally, someone who's now a high official in the UUA circulated that letter with the 300 signatures, urging more ministers to sign it, and another 200 signed it. And in her cover note, she said, "Fellow ministers, please take a moment to read this letter signed by more than 300 white UU ministers in response to one of our own colleagues publishing and distributing a racist, transphobic, homophobic, sexist treatise while we were at General Assembly. Read this letter, but please don't go out and purchase the book out of curiosity. Trust the hundreds of people who have seen it, especially our siblings of color and our LGBTQ kin who have been hurt by this. It's bad." So not only didn't most of the original condemners of this minister not read the book, this person soliciting more signatures saying, "Don't read the book, just condemn it, just condemn it." It boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. Just lately, I've had just a smattering of this applied to me again. I'm the chair of an organization called Unitarian Universalists for Multiracial Unity, where we're saying, let's go back to the MLK approach to fighting racism. It's the only thing we've seen work in our lifetimes. Let's go back to that. And at this year's General Assembly is in Portland, Oregon. And it's going to start June 22nd. And at the General Assembly, there's an exhibit hall where organizations can buy booths to distribute literature and you know, push whatever it is they're selling, whether it be an intellectual thing or a physical thing. And we applied for a booth, and we were happy to pay the $1,000 that was going to require. And we got a letter back from the executive vice president of the UUA. This is the president of the UUA is mostly a figurehead and a fundraiser. It's the executive vice president who runs the UUA on a daily basis. We got this letter from him saying, "We deny your booth. You cannot have a booth. You cannot purchase a booth. This is because of the incompatibility of your mission with the goal of General Assembly. Of course, your individual members can attend General Assembly as individual participants, but we will not provide a paid platform to advocate against the core values of the UUA. Our mission, the mission that they're saying is incompatible with the core values of the UUA. Our mission is to promote multiracial unity using the 7 UU principles." That's it. It's on our website. It's always been on our website. To promote multiracial unity using the 7 UU principle. What's going on here? It's safetyism gone nuts. This man, this executive vice president in his 30s, he interprets disagreement as injury. He experiences disagreement as injury. And he's so wrapped up in this that he can't even distinguish between two kinds of disagreement. We disagree with the UUA about strategy. We don't disagree about goals. We want to fight racism too. And he can't even distinguish those two things, a disagreement about strategy and a disagreement about goals. When the UUA was formed, when the last T was crossed and the last I was dotted in May 1961, this is the first sentence of the founding document of the UUA. The members of the Unitarian Universal Association, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. Foundation of our religious fellowship is the free and disciplined search for truth. These people who cannot tolerate any kind of dissent or disagreement are in gross violation of this, in my opinion. I feel I needed to tell you about this stuff. It's been going on for years. Most people in the pews have no idea that it's going on. A few people have noticed, for example, that UU World magazine, if you get it, is now pushing a single point of view all the time. Some of you have noticed that UU World magazine doesn't have a letters column anymore. A letters column, letters to the editor. There's no pushback allowed, even in the online version, where there's no limit on space. There's no. I felt I needed to warn you that this is going on. How might it affect you? Well, if there's a pamphlet, say, published by the UUA that seems appealing, it seems something we want to purchase and hand out, I'd advise you, read it first. You can't just, I don't think you can trust these people anymore. Read it first, then buy it, fine. And this even more important thing, if we ever hire a full-time minister again, hundreds and hundreds of UU ministers have an integrity problem, in my opinion. Either they really believe that our churches are social justice organizations. See, we're not. We're about religious questions. Religious questions are questions like, is there an afterlife? And whether there's an afterlife or not, how should I live my life so it'll be fulfilled and meaningful and righteous? So I won't feel I've wasted my life at the end of my life. These are religious questions. And of course, working for social justice projects is a way to give meaning to your life. But the congregation itself is not a social justice organization. And the UUA is not a social justice organization, even though they're behaving this way. We have some ministers who seem to really think that each congregation is a social justice organization. And I would say they're really misunderstanding what UU ministry is about. So you got to watch out for these people. And then there's a whole bunch of other ministers who seem to feel that their job is not to serve the congregation that pays them. They're really working for the UUA. They feel this. They feel that it's their obligation as a minister to push the UUA's point of view on every congregation they serve. And I think there are lots of ministers who don't even agree with what the UUA is pushing, but they don't want to get in trouble with the UUA. There's a lot of problems of integrity. You need to know this. A lot of our ministers have a problem with integrity. It breaks my heart to say this. I said I could end on a positive note. Thank goodness for congregational polity. Number one, they can't make us do anything, right? We're not like a Methodist church where the bishop can yank out a minister and put in another minister, or, do that kind of thing. They can't make us do anything. But more importantly, and I'm not just faking coming up with a positive thing. This really is a positive thing to me. Unitarian Universalism is a wonderful thing. It's not quite a religion. I think it's more appropriate to describe it as an approach to religion. It's an approach to religion. It urges people to develop their own religion. And the congregation is a place where others help you to develop your own religion. We'll never be hugely popular because it's too hard. It's too hard a thing to ask people to do, to fashion their own religion. But for those of us who want that task, it's a wonderful thing. Oh my goodness. When I first came to this church in, I think, 1980, the old building that burned, it was like a breath of fresh air. Oh my goodness, this is wonderful. This is nothing like my experience in church before. Unitarian Universalism is a wonderful thing. By the way, the UUA has trademarked the expression Unitarian Universalism. They've trademarked that. Just so you know, it's ridiculous. Whether they've trademarked it or not, it's a wonderful thing. It's a life-giving thing. It's a groundbreaking thing. It's not for everyone, but for those of us who feel a little drawn to this, it's just a wonderful thing. And we have it. We have it. At the Unitarian Church in Fall River, we have it. It's too bad that the UUA officials seem not to have it anymore. They've lost faith in their own religion. It's too bad that they don't have it anymore. And it would be nice if they get it back, and I hope they do. But in the meantime, it doesn't matter because we have congregational polity and we have Unitarian Universalism here. Enough. Sorry I went on so long. And now, for the support of this congregation and its work, the morning offering will be gratefully received, and I hope freely. This is our time of sharing joys and concerns. Yes, Walter.
Joy. On May 24th, Louisa Slated was born. Healthy, 7 pounds, 7 ounces.
This is a grandchild?
Today, Beth and I got our set up based on that. And then baby came a little early, so you find out pretty quickly the 7 pounds one is one calling the shots. But you're doing fine. Beth and I stayed for a week, and I came home and had to stay.
Yeah.
In Austin, Texas. Oh. Yeah. Talk to them. Yeah.
It's a big lifestyle also.
Yeah. Austin is
I just have to do an update on my mother. She's 98, had a heart attack a couple months ago, and so, everybody's all worried about her. Well, she wants to come visit me. She's in the house, I'm here, and I live in a second floor apartment. And I said, Mom, Think how I would feel if you had another heart attack and died on the stairs on the way up to my apartment. And she said, "Oh, Susan, you'll be all right." But you know what, I'm gonna say she died doing what she really wanted to do, which was kind of the thing. So, if she got so she'll be coming for a visit, I don't know.
Just to let you know, I go to town once a week on Tuesdays, have a big car issues, and if she dies in the car, they won't bother you with it.
Anybody else? We have lots of things on our minds and in our hearts that we haven't shared. And let's remember that. As somebody said, this is one of those internet memes, but I think it's true. Everyone has some kind of struggle that we're not aware of. Can we join in our closing hymn? It's a long hymn, but to me, it says a lot about what our churches are about. Number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. May ours be a religion that, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Amen. The postlude is by Mr. Nancy Donald.
Well, this kind of does fit the general theme today. It's a song written by a woman named Pat Humphreys, who grew up in Ohio, had family that was at Kent State, 1970, as my brother was. And she became after that, I'd say an activist. I don't know if she's actually a UU or not, but she's certainly a fellow traveler. This one's called Swimming to the Other Side. And there's a lot of words in this one, so I have a hard time playing it slowly enough that you can actually hear the words. There's 4 verses here, must be 1,000 words. We are living beneath a great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. I'm alone and I am searching, hungering for answers in my time. I am balanced at the brink of wisdom. I am patient to receive a sign. I move forward with my senses open. Imperfection, it'll be my crime. In humility, I will listen. We're all swimming to the other side. On this journey through thoughts and feelings, binding intuition, my head, my heart, I am gathering tools together. I am prepared to do my part. All of those who've come before me, band together and be my God. Loving and lessons I will follow. we're all swimming to the other side. And when we get there, we'll discover all the gifts we've been given to share have been with us since life's beginning, and we never noticed they were there. We can balance at the brink of wisdom, never recognizing that we've arrived. Loving spirits will live together. We're all swimming to the other side. Loving spirits will live together. We're all swimming to the other side.
Nice choice, John.
Okay. Hopefully we're